This dude's a lunatic. Who the fuck cares if he endorses Trump? Like, here's where RFK's real fucking impact has been in the anti-vaccine world.
What do you know about the independent state of Samoa, formerly known as Western Samoa? It's 6,000 miles from the main,
especially in other countries.
It's been a center of Polynesian culture in the South Pacific, as well as an ancestral homeland to the Rock, whose mother hails from that island nation. In late 2019, though, the country was in a public health crisis, not from a new threat like COVID, but from a very old killer of kids that had once been nearly eradicated.
By the way, the poll went 100% no. This doesn't change how I'm going to vote in November.
Measles.
This is the biggest increase in deaths we've seen since records began. The figure of 32 dead is up from 25 only yesterday.
These hospitals aren't designed to deal with this, and I think the minute you're getting hospitals running at 200% and 300% capacity, I think that speaks for itself. It's incredibly serious.
The government of Samoa declared a measles epidemic in October of 2019. Most of the victims were children. In one family, 2 sisters and a brother were killed by the disease. The oldest was just 3. In another family, 2 sisters-in-law both lost sons aged 14 months and 6 months who died just 2 days apart. The mother of the oldest told the UK's Telegraph newspaper, "I saw him every day on the life support machine and I saw him deteriorating. It's very hard to accept and to see my child suffer like that." By December, almost 4,000 cases had been reported in a country of 200,000, roughly the same.
Especially in some of these places where there's not a big push to like clear up misinformation, or government organizations that can afford to get out like grassroots and explain to people the benefits, and people just believe what they see online or believe what they hear or what someone else is spreading.
In population is Des Moines, Iowa. And
I mean, we're not great about it either. We have Q-tards, but it could be worse.
55 people, mostly children under the age of 4, had died. The tiny nation imposed a 2-day national lockdown. Citizens were stuck in their homes to stop the spread. Government volunteers fanned out to help families in need. Anyone in distress was instructed to fly a red banner from their house. The banners were everywhere. As some overseas charities began shipping children's coffins over to Samoa to cover for a local shortage. An international health effort was underway. The Samoan government even asked the US CDC for help. By the time the Samoan government declared an end to the epidemic, 83 people had died. Again, most of them kids. Now remember, we're talking about measles here, a disease that was almost eliminated worldwide thanks to safe, effective, and cheap vaccines. In fact, in 2013, 92% of infants in Samoa were receiving the measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine around the time they turned a year old. In 2017, though, that was down to 67%. And in the one-year period from 2017 to 2018, it dropped down to about 40%. As the New York Times put it, Samoa was suddenly on a par with some of the poorest countries in Africa. What happened to send the rate so low in 2018 specifically? Well, a growing anti-vaccine movement found a story to rally around. That year, 2 infants died after getting the vaccine. They died because their nurses had made a fatal mistake in administering the shots. They mixed a muscle relaxant into the vaccines instead of sterile water. Those nurses quickly...
So this is medical malpractice, right? They, instead of using a vial of sterile water when they're mixing this vaccine, the same way that you would, drop just about anything with some type of sterile water, They grabbed the wrong vial. They used a muscle relaxant and basically overdosed the children. But that's not what anti-vaxxers dove on.
He confessed their error and pled guilty to manslaughter. But those facts did not matter to Samoan...
That's right, Nightingale.
Instead of telling the truth, they claimed that the vaccine itself was responsible for the deaths. And they got help from a US-based anti-vax group, Children's Health Defense, which took to Facebook to question the safety of the vaccines that those infants received. But again, it wasn't the vaccine, and there was no correction from that US group.
The charity did not update the post to explain the nurse's errors to its
In
audience.
the wake of those 2 deaths, Samoa's prime minister gave in to the anti-vaxxers and halted the country's measles vaccination drive in 2018 and continued the pause for nearly a year, even after the people of Samoa learned that the...
This is like getting hit by a train in your car while leaving McDonald's and an anti-McDonald's group jumps off on it and says that Big Macs can cause decapitation and death from blunt force trauma, and then just cramming it down your throat so no one eats at McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like, this is wild.
The nurses and not the vaccine were the reason for those 2 children dying. Samoan health experts urged the government to resume mass vaccination, but they didn't do so until well into the outbreak. The founder of Children's Health Defense, a prominent American anti-vax activist, would later tell a Samoan newspaper that he had the Prime Minister's ear on the issue, and that the island nation's leader had privately shared his doubts about the safety of immunizing the public. That activist, quote unquote, had become something of a celebrity in Samoa. He was honored as a guest of the Prime Minister. He met with local anti-vax activists. Who was this American anti-vaxxer who bragged after the epidemic about his sway with the Samoan leader?
And this should always be his legacy.
Actually,
80-something, they ought to fucking be showing up to his goddamn speeches with child fucking caskets.
he's the reason why I'm telling you all this.
When I am the President of the United States, I am going to end the chronic disease epidemic in this country. ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette's syndrome, ASD, and autism. This is crippling to the middle class in this country. And we need to figure out what it is.
Sometimes the right misinformation at the right time and not understanding what the fuck you're talking about and still talking can be as deadly as fucking drone strikes or anything else, right? No one else, you wouldn't give a pass if the president ordered a drone strike and killed 83 children because he thought they were terrorists there, right? He legitimately believed there were terrorists there. There would still be people fucking raising hell. But because he's there telling the president not to vaccinate kids and 83 fucking children die in a year of measles outbreaks, that was basically almost eliminated before that. Then people are like, oh, well, you know, he's just asking questions.
Yes, that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, like how many kids can you fit into one kid's casket?
Who's running against Joe Biden for the Democratic presidential nomination. RFK Jr., who heads the anti-vax Children's Health Defense Network, which has since been banned from Facebook and Instagram for spreading misinformation.
Oh, that's big Democrat and big pharma trying to take him down. Banned from Facebook.
RFK Jr., who in June 2019, along with his wife, actress Cheryl Hines, was a special guest of the Samoan Prime Minister at the country's Independence Day celebration. While on that trip, Kennedy also just happened to meet with one of Samoa's most prominent anti-vaxxers, and she posted a pic of them together on Instagram, along with the hashtag #InvestigateBeforeYouVaccinate. It's on that trip that Kennedy would later brag where he spent extensive time with the Samoan leader. Quote, "The Prime Minister was a joy to be with. He spent a lot of time with us. We met many health officials." Kennedy told reporters he and the Prime Minister only talked a limited amount about vaccines.
And then the motherfucker runs to Joe Rogan to do the exact same thing on Joe Rogan's podcast, the largest fucking podcast in the world. He has no regrets about any of this.
Vaccines, and mostly discuss whether his charity, the Children's Health Defense, could help improve Samoa's health system. Weeks later, the epidemic of the unvaccinated was underway in Samoa. And as more
I'm bald from a vaccine injury.
children died that November, Kennedy sent the Samoan Prime Minister a
Investigate before you vaccinate.
A letter pressing him to investigate whether
Or you might alopeciate.
those children died not of measles, but ridiculously of exposure to the measles vaccine. Quote, "Children who received the live measles virus during Samoa's recent vaccination drive may have shed the virus and inadvertently infected vulnerable."
So their claim is that it wasn't us that got people to not vaccinate their fucking kids at the lowest fucking rate in a century. It was the parents who still vaccinated and their kids shed the vaccine measles and killed those unvaccinated healthy kids.
Vulnerable children.
My vaccine injury is an 11-inch penis.
He added, "It is a regrettable possibility that these children are causalities of Merck's vaccine." He probably meant casualties. Either way, he didn't know what he was talking about. Remember, Kennedy is in Merck's vaccine. Shed the virus and inadvertently infected vulnerable children. He added, "It is a regrettable possibility that these children are causalities of Merck's vaccine." He probably meant casualties. Either way, he didn't know what he was talking about. Remember, Kennedy is an environmental lawyer with zero qualifications to talk about vaccines or healthcare of any kind. actual physicians with actual experience have been quick to debunk RFK's letter, pointing out that there's no evidence for his claim that vaccinated kids...
Zero evidence of any MMR vaccination shedding. Zero. Absolute none. There is no evidence at all that they shed any type of super fucking measles that kills a bunch of kids. It was literally his misinformation, his support of the misinformation, his being there, his talking to the president that did this.
Shed the measles virus, and noting that even if they had, it couldn't cause an outbreak. It was just as false as those posts by RFK's nonprofit suggesting those 2 Samoan infants, those 2 children had died from the vaccine in 2018, posts that were never retracted or corrected. In fact, we reached out to Kennedy's presidential campaign for comment this week on his vaccine misinformation in Samoa, and they doubled down. This is who RFK Jr. is. This is the brand he's running on.
When people like to say, oh, it's their choice, oh, let them do it, let them do that, that's good till a point. And then they're endangering the life of your kids and your grandkids and your family, right?
He'll deny he's anti-vaccine, and then he'll tell anti-vax crowd.
That's why we have herd immunity. It's fine to a point to say, oh, she's just some crazy lady, let her be crazy if she don't want to get hurt. But then it affects your fucking family.
Falsely, that this is how measles epidemics end.
The thing that cured it was nutrition and clean water, not the vaccine.
Nutrition and clean water do not cure measles.
No, the thing that ended the epidemic was when an emergency vaccine drive got rates back above 90% in Samoa by the end of December 2019. But what does RFK Jr. care? As ignorance, misinformation, and...
So they got back above 90% immunization in an emergency push, where they were like, this is the only thing that could potentially save this and prevent thousands upon thousands of deaths. And he's like, clean water and nutrition. We gave him all multivitamins and TRT.
Conspiracy theories go mainstream and get monetized. This is how he gets on the Joe Rogan podcast and gets anti-vax followers to swarm reputable doctors. And yes, I could tell you about Kennedy's gaffes, like the photoshopped Russian stock image he recently tried to pass off as a campaign ad on Twitter.
Sorry.
I could tell you how even his own family, with the name that he's traded on for years, has blasted his campaign to attack the institutions committed to reducing the tragedy of preventable infectious diseases.
The more you know, the more you know.
I can tell you how excited former Trump White House aide and pardoned felon Steve Bannon is about RFK's candidacy and its potential to tilt the 2024 election to Trump. But really, all you need to know about Rob...
This is wild. When we usually vaccinate against these extremely deadly, extremely contagious, extremely bad, or leave you like all fucked up in some sort of way for the rest of your life, even though you get it as a kid. And mutation, right? We already we know shit already mutates, right? The same way that we can't overprescribe antibiotics, and we figured that out, right? Shit mutates. So even if you don't talk about like immunocompromised, like this kid can't have a vaccine because of their immune system, right? They wouldn't be able to fight it off, or even adults. The herd mentality keeps it down to where it's not transferring from person to person to person to person to person, to where it does get some type of mutation, to where it can bypass our vaccine system, and then everybody's acceptable, and then we have another Operation fucking Warp Speed coming out with whatever they've got on the fucking playbook.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., about his role in our public life, about his contribution to humanity, is encapsulated in the story of the measles epidemic that killed scores of children in Samoa in 2019. An epidemic not just of disease, but of misinformation and vaccine denial, fueled by a politically ambitious Kennedy kid with the ear of that country's leader. A politically ambitious Kennedy kid now challenging Joe Biden for the Democratic presidential nomination. So the next time you see RFK Jr. described just as a vaccine skeptic or a political maverick,
he's just asking questions. What's wrong with asking questions? This is what's wrong with asking questions. When the person asking the questions and giving you the answer is not qualified in any way, shape, or form to be either asking those questions or especially giving the fucking answer, This is what's wrong with it.
Remember that does not do justice to who this guy is. There are very horrible, deadly, real-world consequences to his vaccines.
I don't like the pick and choose who we trust, who we don't trust. Like if someone that was out here advocating against child car seats and we saw a fucking 3,000% increase in child deaths in car accidents because they're just fucking buckled up or laying across the back dash, we'd be like, what the fuck is this? This guy is responsible. But because it's the vaccine and big pharma and you can't trust anybody and he's just asking questions, they're like, well, you know, whatever happens, happens. Because it didn't happen to their kids. It didn't happen to a kid in their community. It was in Samoa. So who the fuck can even find that on a map?
Stance. The consequences in Samoa were the needless deaths of more than 80 people, most of them kids. I mean, a mother having to watch her dying child suffer in pain? Does RFK Jr. give a damn? Who knows? But what we do know is that he's a proven public health threat who spreads fear and lies and conspiracies. So some of you watching today may want an alternative to Joe Biden in the Democratic presidential primaries, which is fine. I get it. But RFK Jr. ain't it.
And this should always be his legacy. If you're wondering what it should be, that's it.